Well, hello everyone, and I hope that you had a wonderful camp last week. We're going to be starting on our new topic on nutrition in plants. You know, our last topic on nutrition in animals reminded me of this situation when I was young. I don't know if you've been through it before, when my mom would come up to me and say, "No, you may not be excused until you finish eating." And she wanted me to eat because that's how I got my nutrition. And the other day I saw a comic strip about plants and their nutrition, and it looked something like this. "No, you may not be excused. You're not leaving the dinner table until you've finished photosynthesizing." "Oh, Mom!" The baby, plant, flower, whatever. For you see, when it comes to nutrition in plants, it's no longer about plants eating, but plants photosynthesizing. Now, the question that I'm going to start with is this. Do you think that plants need nutrients, like carbohydrates, fats, and proteins to survive? Do they need it? Do plants need carbohydrates, fats, and proteins? And the answer is a resounding yes. Plants need nutrients. Plants need carbohydrates and fats for energy, and they need proteins to build new tissue and to repair worn-out cells. Now, if plants need nutrients to survive, then where do plants get their nutrients from? Now, animals got their nutrients from eating, right? From ingesting. Nom, nom, nom. Plants, on the other hand, they don't really eat or ingest. So plants get their nutrients from photosynthesis. Plants carry out photosynthesis to obtain their nutrients, to obtain their carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So in this topic, we're going to be looking at how plants obtain nutrients through photosynthesis. Now, you've probably got really tired of photosynthesis by now. You've learned it since primary school, right? They already tell you that plants carry out photosynthesis. But at this O-level standard, we're going to be looking deeper at what is photosynthesis, what happens during photosynthesis, what is the equation for photosynthesis, especially this one in symbols, which is new for you, and what actually happens during photosynthesis. So here are the textbook pages for the Pure Biology textbook. First, let's look at the word photosynthesis. It's really made out of two words, photo and synthesis. The photo means using light energy, and synthesis means making something, right? Synthesizing. In this case, synthesizing nutrients. So really the word photosynthesis means using light energy to synthesize nutrients, such as carbohydrates. Now, we know that plants get their nutrients through photosynthesis. Plants use light energy to make nutrients like carbohydrates. But there's a little question here. Where do plants get their raw materials to make carbohydrates? I mean, we've got the energy, right? We know where the energy comes from to build the thing, but where do the raw materials come from to build the nutrients, to build the carbohydrates? Now, I think some of you probably have the answer in your minds. You're like, duh, I already know. The raw materials which plants use to make their nutrients is, firstly, carbon dioxide, right? CO2, and then they also use water, H2O, to make their nutrients. Duh, I already knew that. Well, that's good for you. But I want you to appreciate something here, and I'm going to take you back on a history journey, back to 1580, to a man named Van Helmont. And through his experiments, we're going to appreciate how it wasn't so easy for us, to reach this point where we know what plants use in photosynthesis. Now, Van Helmont asked this question of where do plants get their nutrients from? Where do they get their raw materials from? So he did a very famous experiment. He grew a tree. Back then, that was an experiment. He weighed the plant. It was about 2.2 kg, and the soil that the plant was planted in, 90.7 kg. Now, what he did was he waited 5 years for this plant to grow, a 5-year experiment. Can you imagine that? He waited 5 years for the plant to grow, And 5 years later, he measured the mass of the plant again. And he found that the plant was now a whopping 76.7 kg. It had increased by a lot. However, the soil was still roughly the same mass. And so, Van Helmont asked the question, where did the new mass in the plant, right, or the growth of the plant, where did it come from? Where did it come from? Could the plants have gotten their new mass and nutrients from the soil? After all, it kind of makes sense, right? You grow the plants in the soil and the plants just absorb all the nutrients from the soil and grew bigger from the nutrients in the soil. You know, that's what people thought for a very long time. But then, if you look at Van Helmont's results, it seems to not support that theory. Because look at the soil. Over 5 years, its mass remained around the same, 90.7 kg. It didn't decrease. And yet the plant increased by such a great mass. You know, if the plant was taking its nutrients from the soil, then the soil would have decreased in mass. But that's not what happened. So the plant probably wasn't getting its nutrients, its new mass, or its raw materials from the soil. So where then did the plant get its raw materials from to grow? Well, Van Helmont came up with a second theory, and he thought that the plant was getting its new mass from water. After all, every day he was watering the plant, and that caused the plant to grow. So he thought, you know, water has mass, so maybe the plant is taking the water and making it into new leaves, right? So it's the water that causes the plant to increase in mass. Now that's a good theory. It is. However, we need to know, to prove this theory, we need to know how much water was added over the 5 years. Was it the same, was the mass of water added the same as the increase in the plant's mass, right? The plant increased by about 70 kilograms. Was there about 70 kilograms of water added? And the thing is, we don't know. Van Helmont didn't record down the mass of water that he added. Now, there was a problem with Van Helmont's water theory or hypothesis. And you'll see the problem as you look at these two questions, starting with this question here, which you can also find in your notes. What chemical elements are found in nutrients? What chemical elements are found in carbohydrates, for example? You should remember this from your topic on nutrients. And hopefully you remember that carbohydrates contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? And glucose, for example, is C6H12O6. So plants, if they are going to make carbohydrates, they need a source of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen to make carbohydrates. Now, what chemical elements are found in water? Now, you should remember that water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, right? H2O. So can water be used to make carbohydrates? Look at it. Well, water can provide hydrogen, right? So you've got hydrogen. Water could provide oxygen, so you've got that. But water can't provide carbon. You can't get carbon from water. So here's the problem. Where do plants obtain their carbon from? It's not from water. So where do plants get it from to make their carbohydrates? So where do plants obtain carbon to make their nutrients or like carbohydrates? Now let's think about the atmosphere, and some of you can already tell me that it's probably from carbon dioxide or CO2. Now in fact, carbon dioxide provides plants with both carbon and oxygen to make their carbohydrates, right? Remember, carbohydrates, you need carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Carbon dioxide already provides carbon and oxygen. So now we need a source of hydrogen. So where do plants obtain the hydrogen to make their carbohydrates? Well, they get it from water, H2O, right? Here, water, you have hydrogen. So water provides hydrogen, and carbon dioxide provides carbon and oxygen to make your carbohydrates. So actually Van Helmont wasn't too wrong after all. He was half right. Now remember, plants want to get the hydrogen from water to make their nutrients. So this is a water molecule. What needs to be done to get this hydrogen out of the water molecule? Now, one suggestion would probably be to split the molecule up, right? We need to, in a sense, break these bonds and split it up. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to split up water. So during photosynthesis, water is actually split. So during photosynthesis, water molecules are actually split. But where does the energy come from to split the water molecules, right? Because this takes a lot of energy to break down this bond. And the hint is, right, this process of splitting water is actually called photolysis. And if you look at the word photo, well, the energy for splitting water comes from light energy. So light energy is used to split water molecules up so that we can get this hydrogen to make nutrients. Now, once plants have obtained the hydrogen that they want to make their carbohydrates, what is left? What is left? Well, obviously, what's left is this oxygen atom. So oxygen is actually produced when you split up water molecules. And that's what happens in photosynthesis, right? We have oxygen that is also produced during photosynthesis. Now, the next question to think about is, how is light energy trapped, right? We need light energy to split water up, but how do we trap or absorb that light energy? Think green. And you probably know this from your Sec 1 and 2. Light energy is absorbed by chlorophyll, right? Plants have this pigment, green pigment, called chlorophyll in their leaves, in their chloroplast of their cells, and that absorbs light energy, and that light energy is used to split water. So let's wrap up everything. Firstly, we've seen that nutrients, carbohydrates, for example, contain the elements carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. Now, carbon dioxide is what provides the plants with the elements carbon and oxygen, and water is what provides the plants with the chemical element hydrogen. So plants use carbon dioxide and water to make carbohydrates. Now, to get that hydrogen, we saw that water needs to be split up, and it needs to be split up using light energy. And when water is split up using light energy, oxygen is produced. And finally, we saw that the light energy needs to be absorbed by chlorophyll. So putting it all together, what is photosynthesis? Well, photosynthesis is the process in which plants use light energy to synthesize carbohydrates from the raw materials, carbon dioxide and water. Now that light energy is absorbed by chlorophyll, and that light energy is used to split water molecules, as we saw, and the light energy is also converted to chemical energy, right, which is used to synthesize carbohydrates through enzyme-controlled reactions, reactions that involve enzymes. And finally, we saw that oxygen is also produced in the process. Now we can put all of this together into an equation called a word equation, and this should look familiar to you from your Sec 1 and 2. And you need to know this very well, you need to memorize it. So we see here that the raw materials for photosynthesis, carbon dioxide plus water, are used to make the products, which is glucose, a carbohydrate, and oxygen. Now, of course, the conditions are you need light energy, and then light energy needs to be absorbed by chlorophyll. Now, one more condition is that you actually need a suitable temperature because it involves enzymes. Now, let's end off with the chemical equation of photosynthesis. This is also super important. Pure bio students, you need to memorize this. And really, it's just a chemical symbol form of the word equation. Carbon dioxide, water to make glucose and oxygen. And just remember the starting numbers, 666, and then this is C6H12O6, and the conditions. Alright, that's all for this video. Let's go.